and it looks like we have kind of a full house. Some people actually trying to get into this session. So with such a large room, I've pulled the tables forward, but I hope that you don't get too comfortable because before I introduce my colleagues, I have a little mix-up for you, an activity that begins by moving you around a bit, so don't get too comfortable. My name is Stanley Burgoyne, and I'm the Global Head of Professional Development for the Middle Years program. And in a few moments, I will introduce the colleagues that are here to join me to help you understand how to usher in the changes in the Middle Years program. But right now, I would like to share a metaphor with you. We're going to work with a metaphor about gardening. So how many of you are gardeners? Great. So with green thumbs abounding, we will proceed. The first thing with our garden we're going to do is actually rotate the crops. So we have legumes, roots, and leaves and fruits. So if you consider your position in your school, your district, or at your role in a not-for-profit, if you're with the IB, there's even a place for you in this. So we have some colleagues joining to learn about changes. I would like those senior leaders, an example would be superintendents, owners, the rest, to congregate briefly when I tell you to in the corner of the room by this speaker. And if you are a middle leader, there are a lot of you probably, coordinators. I'm going to change the graphic up because I think we need more room for you. Middle leaders, you should be in the back of the room to my right hand side. Community leaders, that could mean my IB colleagues, for example. If you're here from any other partnership, there's room for you where Robert's standing by that speaker. And instructional leaders, that would be teachers, and I've listed a few others. So if you identify in any of these ways immediately, then that's great. If you're puzzled, then we'll move you about for the sake of argument. What we want you to do when you get there is just a personal check-in with people to say how you like the conference. There's no assignment, so something good about the last few days, all right? Any questions about where to congregate? And we're just going to do this quite quickly. And what I'm going to ask you to do after you congregate is come back to attention. You're a really quiet group, so I'm not worried about that. So that we're going to mix up our table groups. You'll come back so we have some representative leadership at each table in these domains. That's the goal here. Does that make sense? You may end up coming back to that table or a different table, because once you're in those places, you could leave all your stuff for now, and we'll mix you up, and then you'll come back. So on the count of 3, I'd like you to go to that place and just say hi to the people in that group. It'll also give you an idea about the makeup of our room. It'll really help you to see who's interested in ushering in this change. Do I need to go through the quadrants where you go again? You got it? Okay. If you don't know, fake it. It's not that big of a deal. Could you go to the place just to talk to people, though? You'll see how it works, and you might end up at your same table. All right, senior leaders, are you ready? I think it's very interesting to see who's in the room. We're about 50-50 coordination and senior leaders, aren't we? Looks like. Which really is great to see what kinds of people were interested in the changes, why you're interested. We have some IB staff members, as you can see, as well as other community leaders, which is terrific. The goal in coming back to the tables is, even if for argument's sake, you're able to take on the roles of all 4 at your table. So we want some diversity in the table groups, that's all. So we wouldn't want to have a table group with all senior leaders. Does that make sense? So I'm going to ask the senior leaders to go back to either where you were or maybe move so that we have some equal representation, okay? So first, senior leaders, come back. And I trust that you will kind of take the high road and move if you have to. If you are all a table of senior leaders, kind of separate a bit. Oh, we have 3 senior leaders here, 4 here. Well, let's start bringing our middle leaders back. Can you make sure that there's some diversity at your table groups? Everybody's going, I already plugged in my laptop, I'm not moving. And if you would allow our teachers and our community leaders to filter back to the tables now. And again, it seems like a lot of people came back to the same table, but that's okay. We have some brave hearts here. We had enough movement to get this job done. So even if, for argument's sake, you came back to the table and you have a little bit of out of balance, we are fine with that. But what we'd like to illustrate is we want each of these quadrant representatives to really play along with what it takes to usher in change from these perspectives, okay? So these 4 groups of leaders represent leadership in your organizations, your schools. And so as you carry on the conversation, you'll notice that we've given you all a handout, and if you don't have one, we have some more. There are 4 quadrants on that handout. They don't match with the 4 quadrants of the leaders. They actually match with the value add, the reason you came, to know some things in advance. And what they match with are the big headers of the development report, which is coming out in just about a month. So those 4 quadrants match this report, which we'll give you in a few minutes as well. And they serve as reminders for those 4 points of view of the things you might consider as you usher in change. So there's not a lot of paper to clutter your tables. This on the back actually has a place for you to take some notes, and we'll explain that scaffold of note-taking in a moment as well. The only other bit of paper you're going to get is this development report, which comes out in a month, and it spells out all the changes in the MYP. So that is a great bit of news for you because you've come for something new. That's it, all right? So the value add, staying for Sunday afternoon with us, has been delightful. I wish I had beignets and coffee for you all, but I know you came for more than that, all right? So again, my name's Stan Burgoyne, and at this time, I'd like to introduce you to some colleagues. Mr. Robert Harrison, head of our academic program stationed in The Hague. Robert and I go back a long way, and he and I have worked very closely together for a long time, but in his new post as academic head, he's done an amazing job to pull elements of the program changes together, and you will see that great work in this development report that I have mentioned. So welcome, Robert, and thank you for being here this afternoon. Robert does have to leave a little bit early, but for those of you who also have to leave a little bit early, just wanted to ensure that you're calm and cool and collected about that. It's okay. If you have flights later this afternoon, the majority of the changes we'll share in the first hour or hour and a half. The remainder of the time together will be a chance to really workshop the changes, talk about how you usher in change from these points of view. So if you have to leave, you have a flight, you've gotten the majority of the information, you're maybe going to miss out on the discussion about implementing change, okay? I'm also joined by Sue Richards, who's head of Global Professional Development for the PYP. I've worked closely with her in her former role in Teacher Education Services. If you've been at her booth or her presentations, she's talked about the teacher certificates, and we're working closely together on a leadership framework that's very exciting. So welcome, Sue Richards. And Ted Williams is no stranger to many people in the room. He is our regional school service manager, and Ted has done a magnificent job of clarifying what we have released in changes and helping schools to understand how it impacts them in their context. We have several other IB employees that I just wanted to recognize quickly. If you'd stand up and maybe we'll go around, I'll share the microphone so you know who they are. Start with Sophia.
Hi, I'm Sofia Dolega, and I'm the MYP Associate Manager. I work together with Ted, and I'm working from Buenos Aires, Argentina.
Hi, Gloria McDowell, Head of School Services.
Michael Clifton, PYP Regional Manager, Bethesda.
Yes, you're a colleague.
All right. My name's Daniel Benham, the Chief Financial Officer based in Singapore.
Thank you for being here, Daniel. And I see oh, you thought I was going to, yeah, right.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Natalia Tieso, Buenos Aires Office Manager.
Hello, Linda Winch, IB Educator Network, IB Americas.
And in her former practice, workshop leader supreme, great moral support for me in all of the challenges in PD. Thank you for being here, Linda. All right, so now that you know who's in the room, I also want to share with you the roles we'll play as we continue over the next few hours. I will be your host, and I'll try to facilitate the various activities, but Robert Harrison will be sharing the development report details with you, and we'll workshop them a little bit so that you have some ideas how to work with them as you introduce them to your staff. Certainly Ted's role is to help facilitate table group discussions as we have activities, and also Q&A when you're asking questions about school service related issues, and Sue and I from the professional development point of view. All right? The topics that we want to discuss today have to do with how we have evolved. We've said for 2.5 years now that this is an evolution, not a revolution in the MYP. We love our program. It's been a terrific program for teaching and learning, and we haven't turned it upside down. However, as it has evolved, you'll see that many aspects are similar but improved. And we give you some examples of that. We have on your table groups, each person has these areas of impact. These, again, follow the main headings of the development report, which you'll get in a few moments. And there are 4 of them, so I'll just quickly go to the next slide. You have them on your table, all right? I'm going to ask Robert to begin now, and if you want to ask questions as we go, that's fine, but I'd ask, just as an essential agreement, that given the limited amount of time, you try to consider and reflect on the change, and then trust that we will have a chance for you to ask questions, especially after our break, which we plan to take at 2:45, maybe with some flexibility, 2:45-ish, towards 3 o'clock. The food and beverages will come in the back of the room, so certainly use the restroom as you wish. In and out is fine, and we also understand that many of you have to leave early, so no problem. So thank you again for being here, and at this time I'll introduce Robert, and he will begin to share some of the key changes, and I repeat that word, key changes that are coming about.
Thank you for spending your Sunday afternoon. Is this today's Sunday? Isn't it? Sunday afternoon with us. It's been a very busy, very busy 3 days, and we appreciate the effort and the time it takes for you to join this effort. The MYP community is one of the best places to be in the world. It attracts very interesting and engaging and delightful people, and the fact that you're here says a lot about your commitment to the program and to bringing it to your schools, and to your own personal commitment to making and doing things right. Teachers, I said before, like to follow rules, and we like to know everything that's going to be, and we like to have it just so. If you're a gardener, you know that never really works, though, right? Or if you've actually taught school. And I want to introduce what we're going to look at today by contrasting what it means to have a change as opposed to what it means to have an innovation. I took my very first MOOC earlier this year, and the professor of business at Vanderbilt says that nobody likes a change because change costs and it disrupts things, and change is difficult, and we talk of ourselves as change agents, as educational leaders, but that usually means that teachers run to hide in the bathroom when we come near them because they just don't want to hear about any more change. They have to deal with, for our students especially, the changing hormones and bodies of these students that look different on Tuesday than they did the previous Friday. But innovation is a different thing. Everybody really does like innovation because it means it's new and exciting, and it offers opportunities we didn't have before. So we're going to be talking about curriculum innovations, not change for the sake of change or change because the light bulb is burned out, and we certainly don't want people looking like that face on the left, because that's what change feels like. It's dangerous and threatening and can be really quite alarming for people. But innovation is something different. It means that there's change and evolution and possibility, and so innovation is where we want to be. We're pursuing this this model of gardening, and it really is because we want to make it clear. A garden needs to have nice, clear structures. That's the first thing a garden architect does, is to lay out the pathways and make sure that the guidelines are there. And these really are the guidelines we've been using, and it was the only slide that I'm going to read, but I'm going to read it because it's so important. At every step, we've tried to make decisions that are better for students, easier for teachers, and more flexible for schools. That was the design from the program's review at the very beginning, and those are the touchstones, the criteria by which we made as many decisions as possible. And that really has three aspects, three repercussions. The first is that we have very clear curriculum requirements with less restriction, so there's more possibility to meet local needs and local circumstances. At the same time, we do have prescribed elements because it's important to know where the boundaries are in your garden. At some point, you have to draw a line, and that's where your garden, and that's the next person's garden beside it. But there have to be ways to work within the garden that mean we can do things a little bit differently. So the middle years program has always been a curriculum framework that's meant to be flexible and adaptable to all kinds of people and all kinds of situations. Even more so, in the curriculum, we want there to be a possibility for multiple approaches, because as we all look at the same problems with the same goals, we're more likely to generate creative and authentic innovations that we can all share. So that's a design decision. And finally, identifying really clearly a global community of practice. If we're all going to be gardeners, then we have some standards we share and some practices that we use in our garden. So you can't come and put your non-organic phosphates in my garden, right? If we're going to have an organic garden, we have rules about what things we use and how it works. And those are the principles that we use to design the curriculum. Now, at any given point, we might actually disagree about whether we've applied the principles directly or correctly, or you might have a way of doing it differently than I do, but these are the principles on which the garden is built. Okay? I bring you greetings from your colleagues in The Hague, where the academic team is, with my team of curriculum writers. We all are on the same floor for the first time in the IB's history. Everybody from the PYP to the IBCC to the DP to the MYP. The room is not nearly as big as this, and we can all yell across the room at each other. And it's a powerful statement of the continuum, and it happens in The Hague, which is why there's this saying. Anybody, any Latin scholars? We did work very hard to get rid of Latin in the IB, so I apologize, but sometimes it's useful. In Veritate Concordia is part of the European Union's model. In America, we would say e pluribus unum. That's our version of it. That we can find some way of being together even though we have quite a lot of differences. So some of us are old and new, some of us are orange and yellow and pink, some of us, like the poor guy in the corner, is a little bit tilted. But we still are recognizable as a family, as a garden, as the kind of plants who are willing to work together and really build a purposefully diverse community that still has standards and practices that we hold in common. How many of you were here to hear Ben Walden and Shakespeare, yes? No. He inspired me because, you know, he didn't really talk much about it, but the last part of Henry V's journey was the switching of metaphors, powerful things metaphors, and it was to turn the battlefield into a garden, right? That's what he talked about. So with apologies to Shakespeare, I'm going to paraphrase part of the speech of the Duke of Burgundy in Act 5, Scene 2. He says, "Why that the naked, poor, and mangled peace, dear nurse of arts and joyful births, should not in this best garden of the world, our fertile MYP, put up her lovely visage? Also, she hath from the MYP too long been chased, and all her husbandry doth lie on heaps, corrupting in its own fertility. So we would like to make what sometimes feels like a battlefield in middle schools and in high schools where this program takes place in the world, and turn it into a beautiful garden. What I didn't know, if you could go just a few more lines down in his speech, is that the Duke of Burgundy taught middle school. Listen. He says, "And as our vineyards, fallows, meads, and hedges, defective in their natures, grow to wildness, even so our children have lost or do not have time to learn the sciences that should become our country, but grow like savages, that nothing do but meditate on blood, to swearing and stern looks, diffused attire, and everything that seems unnatural." So you can now take that to for Shakespeare for middle level educators. So here's a question for you. This looks a little bit like what things look like now, but this is what the program model will be when From Principles into Practice and all the subject guides are made available in pre-publication versions. It's likely to be in black and white rather than in color then. And so just take a moment, and it's pretty big, but if you need to, with middle-aged eyes like mine, walk closer to have a look, that's okay. Because I would like you to just have a quick discussion with somebody nearby you, what you notice that's different about the way it's about to be. Okay? A quick discussion. Going to move ahead quickly because we could spend a lot of time talking about this, and in your presentations to parents and to faculties, you could be able to unpack the model for hours at a time, I have no doubt. But just quick shout-outs. What do you notice, first of all, that's the same? What's the same? What hasn't changed? So the learner profile is still in the center, although I hope you read that in July, the learner profile revision report was on the OCC, and so although the names have stayed the same, the descriptors have changed, so it is the same, but it's a little bit different too. What else is the same? Now, what's the same first? What's the same as the way it is right now? Think like a graphic designer. It's still round, good, yeah, perfect. That's okay, that's one important thing, that people are still grieving the hexagon, so some of our friends. They're still there, but they're also different. Yes. The student's still at the center. Nobody said it's still orange. It's a terrible color, but it's our color, so we must embrace it and love it. It's a lovely color. Reddish orange. It has a number, but I can't remember the number of it. It still is the same program in English, although honestly, if you work in French, the name of the program is changing a little bit to meet the needs of, especially of our colleagues in Quebec. So it's the middle years program, but the way it works out in French is going to be a little bit different. It still talks about international mindedness as the foundation, right? In the background, you should be able to see the continents, so that's a little graphic element that stays the same in terms of this is an international program which has global contexts. The personal project, is it still there? Yes, it is still there. Yeah, good. Now we're getting things that are different, right? So what is different? There's approaches to teaching there. That's a new thing, yes. There are global contexts because the areas of interaction have been innovated, yes. The names of the subject groups have changed, right? And if you have DP colleagues, they will now be able to understand what you're talking about. Yes, and likewise, and poor parents who had the same child who thought, I thought they were studying humanities a bit. Which one, what are they studying? So we should be able to have some things like that. The community project also is an innovation that's there. We'll talk about that in a few moments. Yes, the names have been changed to protect the innocent. So some of the names actually did change from technology to design, but that also is in line with DP continuum effort. Yeah. Action and service are there that are important also. Approaches to learning has moved out. It stays the same word, but like we had in our community of practice, it had evolved to not being really an area of interaction, that now it's really a separate thing and important, even closer. If you are a true graphics aficionado, you will notice that the position of the subjects has also changed, so that now then the position on the wheel matches the PYP and the DP, which should be a nice little bit. So there's a lot you can use to unpack that to see that there's a lot of continuity, and there are some significant changes as well. So we want to have a chance to work through some of the significant changes and to give you a chance not only to hear them, but to live them and play with them a little bit, since we have the gift of time this afternoon. So our able IB helpers are bringing around to your table a variety of playthings, because you need some tools to work in the garden, and you have to get your hands dirty if you're to have nice flowers. And we're going to dirty our hands today a little bit on the idea of conceptual understanding, particularly what it means to understand concepts using PYP words in an MYP way. Okay? If you have PYP colleagues, it will not be news to you that there are things called key and related concepts. And if you have been studying conceptual understanding through practitioners like Lynn Erickson, the idea of macro and micro concepts will not be a stranger to you. And if you've been around the IB, where we talk about our curriculum being conceptually based, broad and balanced, and also connected, the idea that they're interdisciplinary and disciplinary kinds of learning will also not be a strange thing to you. What might be news to you is the names of the key concepts and how we define them in ways that lead toward interdisciplinarity. So, we promise the answer is coming in just a moment. We'd like you to play around first and see how you can do at matching up the names with the definitions. And if things have worked well, you should be able to do that with your table, but don't be afraid if at your table you can't find a match to talk to a friend, because the number of tables and the number of cups didn't exactly work out as it was planned. So we're bringing some more, and you'll have a chance to play too, we promise, because there's enough for everybody. Yeah. 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 Okay. What? Okay, you're now getting a copy of a very hot document. Yes? And would you please, all together on the count of 3, tell me what it says in the watermark? 1, 2, 3, draft, right? Until the 3rd week of August when it's published. That means that while the content is assured, things may well change because it's in the process of being translated into IB's working languages now. And in the process of translation, things can shift a bit. So it's draft, and you don't have to hide it under your bed. Please don't put it on eBay and sell it this afternoon. That's not the point. Almost all of this is already public information. It's gathered together in a useful way for you. And everybody will have this really within a few weeks. So we thought since you took the time and the trouble and invested the money to come to this event, you can see it now. Okay? And you can share it with your friends. It's not as if it's top secret information. But it really is important to distinguish between what's published and what's still in process. Is everybody clear about that? It really is very important. Yeah? And so until it's on the OCC, it isn't official. We do this also in a very selfish way from program development's perspective. This is an important point, okay? If I could have your attention back just for a moment. Because it gives us one last chance to adjust things which might, how many English teachers are there in the room? Yeah, thank you. So if you find a jot or a tittle or a comma or a semicolon that's out of place, you can very discreetly mark it and put it on the desk. You don't even have to sign it or anything. There's still a little time because many eyes have looked at this document, but as soon as somebody else does, there will be something else that we find, and you can contribute to its production today also. That'll be great. More importantly, we really want to use this time together for you to help the IB community, because we will, as we say, this will be public on the OCC and the IB's 3 working languages in a matter of weeks. And following that, we would like to produce FAQs, questions that are likely to arise, because no matter how clearly we think we have been able to articulate a change or a document or a deadline, somebody will think of an angle that we haven't, because this is a very big world. And there are lots of really smart people in it, which is a good thing. So if you find a question that needs clarification, we'd like to know so that we can start already anticipating answering those questions. It'll be a great service to the entire MYP community. So please offer those to us. You can leave them here. You can write them on a chart. If you tell them to me, I will forget them. So please write them down. Or you can always email us at myp.curriculum@ibo.org. Very easy to get to. And we check the mailbox regularly, and it's an important point of communication with IB World Schools. Yes, I think so. If you didn't see them, I want to direct your attention to page, well, it's not even paginated. That shows you how draft it is. It actually would be page 3, where there's a little chart that looks like this one. Do you see it? Yes? And then beneath that is some information about how we use key concepts. And beneath that are the definitions. Before we go to the activity stand, I just want to say one word about where did these come from, because parents, teachers, and students, and you will want to know the answer to that question. That'll be one of the FAQs we talk about. Where did these come from? In the process of curriculum development, every subject group had a lot of discussion about what are the most important ideas for our subject group that have currency and more than what we do. So every subject group in the MYP contributed to this list. That's where it came from. They came from the disciplines, from the content and the structure of knowledge that's important for us to understand, for our students to understand, honestly. And then that list was condensed down to this list of 16 concepts that have disciplinary applications but have transdisciplinary power. Okay, that's the way I would describe it. Disciplinary applications with transdisciplinary power. Because in every subject guide, you will see which of these key concepts that subject group contributed to the list. And there are some that have natural affinity, right? We could play a little game if we had time. If you can try to imagine which group submitted which one. And that's interesting to know, and that's probably the key concept that'll be most likely. For example, the best clear example is logic. It actually came from the mathematics group, but if you teach English or you teach science or you teach all kinds of things, logic is important. It's going to be in the math guide, sort of front and center, but it also has the power to reach across the disciplines, which is what gives it its key or macro nature. Now, the next question people will ask is, okay, there are these 16, can we have more? Why, of course. Remember the principle? We define a community of practice, and then we say if you need to add to it or you have a different insight from the curriculum development process, you certainly can. But these are the ones that we'll be working with. The next question that already people ask is, well, do you have to do all 16 every year in every subject? Please don't do that. It will kill yourself and your students. What we'll say is that over the course of a student's MYP journey, they need multiple opportunities to interact with all these concepts. Why are they especially important? As we move toward 2016, when we have e-assessments, this becomes the content of the examinations because it's a shared understanding and it's a defined universe of things to think about. So that's why they're this important. So those are the 3 FAQs I know already. If you have others, write them down and tell us. Now, we want you to play a little game to demonstrate the transdisciplinary power of these key concepts. Okay. So, I heard at one table that they couldn't even wait because they want to know each other so nicely. But many of you are meeting each other for the first time at your table, and this is how we want you to do it. The first thing you have to do is to introduce yourselves and tell what you majored in college. So, hello, I'm Robert. I live in The Hague. I was a history and psychology major. Okay? And you are?
I'm Bernard Merkel. I majored in international studies at Willamette University in Oregon.
Perfect. Where do you live now?
Portland, Oregon.
There you go. So do that at your tables and meet each other, would you? To do just what Bernard's going to do, okay? He's going to go around the table and tell you what their majors were. So you need to make sure you know what the person's major was in college. Here you go.
Right here, architecture, English history, art history, and music.
Well done. Now, in your head, or if you're a brave and sort of outgoing person, do that at your table and make sure you know what everybody's major is. It's important. Okay, check and see. Here's the next step. Shh, this is important. The HR department has just called you and has told you have just been promoted. You're back to being a classroom teacher. And you're going to be teaching this subject that you majored in college, whether you're prepared to or not. So that's what your role is. You're in the classroom, and this is your teacher of
Architecture.
your teacher of architecture. It's a brand new product design course in the MYP. Excellent. Good. So at your table, you have lots of concepts. I'm just going to pick one. Sorry, it's going to be this one. So at your table, you're going to choose a concept, and you're going to pretend that little stupid Robert is in your class, and he has a very strange schedule. He has architecture, American studies, and English, and history, and art history, and music. That's his schedule. And in his schedule, he's going to walk around the school, and he's going to say, "Oh, teacher, Miss, I'm here to tell you today that we need to talk about communication." And you're going to say, "Oh, in communication, in American studies, international studies, that communication is really important because," and talk about the really excellent lesson you could teach on communication. Okay, and you're going to do the same for your subject, and you for your subject. Now, it can't be a dissertation because we only have 3 hours. So try to keep it brief, especially if you're your humanities teacher or an English teacher. A few sentences will do. And make sure that you explain why this concept would be really cool to teach on in your class today. Okay, go. That you had a chance to take one of those concepts and sort of work it through the curriculum. Yes? We come back together and hold the discussions, please. We're going to move ahead quickly because we want to make sure we're done before the break. I hope this demonstrates to you, at least in one key concept with a fairly random assortment of disciplines, how they have power to reach across disciplines and the school day to really connect the curriculum. We say we have a broad and balanced, conceptual, and connected curriculum. That's what you just did, is to prove that that's the case in the MYP. It's very important from educational philosophy and from pedagogical principles for all those things. And it's as simple as taking a key concept, putting it in your back pocket, and walking around the school and making sure everybody understands how that has relevance for what he or she is teaching. Very important. So the key concepts: broad organizing principle, powerful ideas, big ideas that have relevance within and across subjects. There will be a quiz to define that before you can go to the break. Now, in addition to key concepts, or macro concepts, if you want to use Lynn Erickson's words, there are related concepts. And for the first time, they're making their appearance in this document, the entire list of related concepts as they are articulated in the subject groups. Now, you'll notice as you look through the list, it's quite a complex table, and there's several things to notice about it. The first is that it's divided into particular subjects, really, so we're looking forward to assessment purposes. So people organize MYP subject groups into particular courses or subjects, and we're defining those because we need to be able to create a common garden we can play in. So the way that they're divided there has connections to later on in the report when you read about e-assessments and how those will be organized, so that there's something to be assessed, because the concepts become our content. You'll see also that there's overlap and that there are sometimes cross-connections and interplay between what is a key and related concept. And sometimes related concepts can be key, and sometimes key can be related. And sometimes they're in this discipline but not that. And there are special cases of integrated humanities and integrated science courses in which multiple disciplines contribute subsets into a kind of a new course that reaches across those disciplines. So in the subject guides, which are in production also now and which will be pre-published in December, so all the information will be there. They won't be pretty because they're not designed yet, but the information will be there. In each of the subject guides, there is an appendix which has definitions of these related concepts. Same kind of questions. Where did they come from? They emerged from lots of hours of discussion, both in person and through curriculum development, as getting to the nature of the discipline. Yeah, thank you. Oh, thanks. So they emerged from the discussion of what it's like to teach this from teachers and from experts and from all the ways we build curriculum together. If we're talking about broad, those are key. If we're talking about deep, those are related. And so that they work together to provide a broad and balanced curriculum. Can you add more to these? Well, of course you can. If you're, we haven't, it's not something that's the curriculum team's business to cross-match these with every possible list of content in the curriculum. But I will, because they're so based in the teaching and learning around these subjects, I think that they will map very neatly with Common Core things, or with other state demands, or with any curriculum you choose, because they go to the heart of what it means to talk about science or mathematics. Can you add to them? Of course you can. Are the definitions set in stone? Well, what definition is? These are ways of approaching the topic. Should you give quizzes to make sure that people can memorize these? I beg you not to. Right? It's the idea that this is the concept, and it's a beginning way of talking about it, not the official approved IB way. In many cases, we copy them from the dictionary, right? Because they're really big ideas. You can add to them. You can add your own perspectives, your own understandings, your own curriculum content to fill out the concepts as needed and add to the concepts if you'd like. But this is the accessible part. And this is the part of the garden that we all have in common. If you need to build on an annex to make sure it's attached, that's fine. But this is our common garden, right? Those are related concepts. This slide is about to be outdated for you because you now have not just samples, but you have the entire list. But if you, we pulled these out just to say that you can see that the related concepts sound a lot like the subject, right? If you're in science, you just can't get around teaching science without talking about energy transformation and evidence. It's the nature of the subject. So this is not rocket science or a complete revelation. It is an innovation and a further defining of the boundaries of the garden, not in a way that goes against MYP principles, because it's still a framework. It's quite open, but it is perhaps more structured than we've been in the past. Okay? So take just a moment at your table, talk to a friend or at least a new acquaintance, and see if you have a question about related and key concepts before we move on to the next thing, okay? Check and see. On the back of your little table chart, you'll see that there are a place to write down things that you find promising, puzzling, or problematic, or if you don't like words that start with P, there's a thing for notes at the bottom. If you have something that puzzles you right now about key and related concepts, take a moment and write it down, and we're going to look at those together toward the end. We won't take time to do it now, but it's a time to take a little brain pause, and particularly if more than one person was puzzled at your table, I would like to know. So make a note of that, okay? Just take a checkpoint now. Next big thing. In the MYP, we have always had content, and we've always had contexts, and we put those together to find what actually is worthy of teaching and learning. We are still having content, we are still having contexts, and we're still going to put them together to describe for our students and ourselves things that are worthwhile understanding. So now we're moving on to talk about contexts. Context define the way you take this big, broad, important, and more abstract idea and ask not only what do I need to know, but why should I bother knowing it? Not only what, but why, or understanding this so that I can do that. And the global context are the why and the so that I can part of the curriculum planning. Here's where it's very advantageous for you to have a PYP friend. Right, Michael? Yes. The PYP man is here. So you'll want to meet him at the break because he has a lot to say. Yeah, he's right over there. It's this guy in the shirt right there. You'll want to know him and his friends and colleagues, and you'll want to find the PYP school nearest you because they are experts already on global context It's just that they call them transdisciplinary themes. Right? You'll see the continuity between them if you look in the development report, and if you think about it a little bit. These are the big questions that PYP students answer, and it's not a mistake. We've sort of upped the game in terms of intellectual challenge and vocabulary, and identified sort of a short and snappy thing that's reminiscent of the areas of interaction, so that we can identify the reasons for learning. The IB's mission is to make a better world through education. If you want to make a better world, you have to understand and be able to interact with all these things, which, as Stanley put them together, almost look like a globe. It's completely by accident, and probably in English and Spanish. Spanish and French it won't work, but English it looks quite nice like that. There'll be posters and all kinds of stuff to support it, but already this is time to start thinking about it. You have concepts that tell you what, you have global contexts that tell you why, and so that. And when you look at them in the development reports, you'll see that they're listed there, and connections with the PYP. And from principles into practice, we will drill these down further so that there's some examples of what they look like in curriculum places. So there is, if you can imagine this column, there's another column that defines them. It's straight out of the PYP. And there's another column which provides some opportunities to think, what would this look like in a middle level curriculum, right? And it's those things which will define the global contexts for the e-assessment. So it's all of a piece, and it's an important way to start thinking about it. The most important thing that I want you to remember about global context is that when you see them, and from principles into practice, you'll see that on the list of explorations, they're by bullets, and it's not a mistake that the last bullet is empty. Why do you think that is? So you can add to them, exactly right. So that you know best what the context for teaching and learning is with you. And like the same principle of curriculum design, we define the boundaries of our common garden, and you can add on to it, put more plants into it if you need to. But it provides a common ground for us. So those are global contexts. Again, this tells you nothing new. Let's go ahead a little bit. Right. So, what we want to do is to have you think about some of these global contexts, and although you don't have the document that has them all in front of you, I want you to start thinking about it in these terms and helping to pretend that we're going to fill in that last bullet, okay? Because the point of the global context is really to bring the IB's mission into connection with the curriculum. So, if the learner profiles prologue says that what we want to be is internationally minded so that we have an understanding of our common humanity and our shared guardianship of the planet, and because we teach the people who are 11 to 16 with all of their many and varied wonderments, needs, and annoyances, we will want to be able to make sure that the global contexts connect with those things. So it's a little thought exercise, and it's really a big ask for Sunday afternoon after a 3-day conference and a party at the Mardi Gras Museum. But if you could start looking at these global contexts that you have here, right, and imagining how they might fit into these categories and sort of coming up with some ideas. Let me give you an example, okay? If you look at, let's take how we organize ourselves, right? That's the PYP transdisciplinary theme. We're going to talk about globalization and sustainability. And I would say that one of the explorations I might want to look at in my history class is the history of urbanization and the consequences urbanization has on traffic flow and energy usage. So that's the context for why I should worry about the 25 facts I must know about urbanization in 20th century America. That's the why, so that I have some understanding of how we have a shared guardianship of the planet. Now, this is a really complicated exercise, and we debated not even doing it because it's Sunday afternoon, but we have faith in the MYP community, and we want you to take a little bit of time perhaps to think about it yourself, how you might take one of these global contexts and use it to meet one of these big goals of when the curriculum crashes into the IB's mission. and see if you can imagine what an exploration would look like to do that. Okay? So I think it probably means for a little quiet in the room so you can think, and then a little tiny conversation with a friend to try out your idea very tentatively. Okay? This is one of those excellent quizzes where everybody wins because all answers are correct, right? Because the point of these contexts is that they have power across these categories. So let me just take an example, and you see if this might have worked at your table. Let's take personal and cultural expression, right? Well, so number 3, personal and cultural expression. Is it our common humanity? Almost certainly, because people belong in groups and we all have our own things we want to tell and be who we are. So it works for that one. Is it our shared guardianship of the planet? Well, consider the Taliban who blew up the Buddhist statues, right? That was our common heritage as a people, and not just our planet like the ecological green space we live on, but the planet Earth and all of us who inhabit it. That had immediate consequences for our guardianship of what's been passed on to us. The developmental concerns of MYP learners, is it okay to paint graffiti if it makes me feel good and I like to put my mark on the world? Is that okay? Really? Is that okay? Do you mind? Banksy makes a lot of money doing it. Why should you mind if I spray painted your room? It's fine, isn't it? So the actual things that adolescents are concerned about and involved in some cases connect with these powerful things because global also includes the national and the local. So this is not just international relations. This is about who we are and how we live together, who our students are, and what their developmental concerns are in their real life. Because if the curriculum doesn't connect to them, so you can answer the question, why am I learning this? And what's the point? Why should I care? Then we haven't done our jobs as teachers, and these give us a powerful tool for doing that. Okay, so those are global context. Another tiny brain break. If you're puzzled about the global context or have things you want to take note of on the back of your sheet, we're going to move on to the third part. Then there's the fourth part, and then there's a break. So we're getting close. Good. Take a moment and add to the back of your page if you need to about global contexts. There will be, you'll learn later, an entire Category 3 workshop in using global contexts, and it's going to be excellent. It's really shaping up very nicely. Okay. We're skipping around a little bit, but I want to direct your attention back to page 2 of the development report. Page 2, Roman numeral 2, which says curriculum finalization of essential program elements. The number one question that we are facing in the MYP community at the moment is, why can't we just have the unit planner now? And no one's trying to keep it a secret, but it takes time to design and to translate, and it will be out in December in its final form. However, one of the design principles for the planner is that it should be as open and teacher-friendly as possible. So it contains remarkably few words, and 95% of them are on page 2 of this document. So if you look at the required elements of the MYP unit planner, and you draw some handy-dandy boxes that put those in a meaningful order for you, then you actually have a unit planner. That will be just fine. And again, as a part of the design principles, the process is what's important, not the single piece of paper. So if you have Atlas Rubicon, or you must use whatever thing to plan units, it's fine so long as you have these components. The other thing that's different for people who've been around the MYP track for as long as some of us have is that we're not going to talk about stages, because that implies an order, a sequential order where you must start here and go there. You'll notice that it's using the big ideas of constructivist education from What is an IB Education for inquiry, action, and reflection, which is a dynamic, interactive triad. So you can start anywhere and it's okay. Right? You can start anywhere and it's okay, so long as when you're all done, the pieces fit together. And it's that coherence of curriculum that's important, not the slavish adherence to a particular piece of paper or a sequence for accomplishing the events that's key. So the unit planner's main components are right there, and they're organized so that you can see what's required. If you've been part of the trainings up to this point, or professional development, or one of the pilot schools, there aren't substantial changes there. Those are things we've been talking about for a while. And they're now, this list is solid, and there will be a planner that we'll produce for December, and you're welcome to use it, but you don't have to. What you have to use is the process. So that's an important thing. Let's do just a quick demonstration to show you that I think it does work, and we have lots of teachers around the world who've tried it. There are about 285 pilot schools in the world. We haven't really been able to count the number of teachers involved in these curriculum revisions. And when the teacher support material becomes available next May and June, there'll be concrete examples of unit plans which follow this process, so you can see them in every subject area. Next, the teacher support materials next May and June of 2014. So here's how it might work, just a very quick demonstration, then we'll talk about ATL, then we'll have a break. If you have the related key concept of communication, related concepts of character and point of view in a language and literature course, we identified identities and relationships as the global context, and the exploration is about human dignity and human nature. That's why we want to explore it. Then we might develop a statement of inquiry with something like this. Authors can use characters with unusual points of view to communicate important ideas about what it means to be human. And we just did the exercise in some PD planning, and we found 7 common core standards that this would meet. So there's a way to do this so that we have the high-level intellectual curriculum that we want, while still meeting the demands of curriculum development authorities and accountability, and particularly for Common Core, but any set of standards you want to bring to it. It's a matter of finding out what the ideas are here, because there's rich disciplinary and interdisciplinary oomph there. And there's a reason to know about character in novels, because it tells us what it's like to be human, and that's a really important thing to be sorting out when you're 15 or 16. Right. Anybody ever read Lord of the Flies? I think you have. Yeah. So we are going to take a break there. When we come back, I do want to talk just for a minute about approaches to learning, because that's an important point here that's going to be in the document as well. What time is it, Stan? All right. So a 15-minute break, grab food, a bio break if you need one, and at 3 o'clock we'll come back together. Yeah. This one?
Nicely done.
Do, and if you'll just do it, if you're still serving yourself, if you could be quiet about that, it would be great. I want to tell you 2 more things, and then I have to leave very shortly. But I want to point out 2 things in the development report that are really important from the academic perspective. One is the approaches to learning, a little bit of new vocabulary to start thinking about as administrators and teacher leaders, is the difference between a category and a cluster. Right? So, and on page, there's not a page number, this is why it's a draft. But if you find the page that talks about ATL, it's the box that looks like that, ATL, approaches to learning. IB ATL skill categories are across all the programs. Not quite the IBCC yet, but really very soon. And if you're a PYP educator, those will also look shockingly familiar to you. You'll see that we're expanding those 5 broad categories into 10 MYP clusters. Right? There are 7 now in Principles into Practice, but we're expanding that number to 10. And once again, the principles into practice chapter will have a good deal more information about ATL. We'll have lots of skills listed out. And they're meant to be really good ones that you can and should use, and you can add more. And we will develop as part of the written curriculum a requirement to do some ATL planning, but not an extraordinary spreadsheet that runs to 10,000 pages with 20,000 skills across 6,000 students at 5 levels of excellence. So it's more an idea to make sure that in your school you're having conversations about how do students build skills over time that might cross grade levels or subjects and grade levels and even programs and buildings, because they're the same students doing the same thing, and a little bit of articulation would be a good idea. The last part that I'll point out to you is subject group objectives. A much wished for, at least in my time as a coordinator, if I had to explain to one more parent why science had 6 and math had 8 and somebody else had 10, I was going to fall over. So now then we have 4 criteria for each subject group and 8 levels of achievement in each of the criteria. So they're equally weighted, they're the same number, and their names are there. And those are, I would say, 98% certain. So some of them may still wiggle a tiny bit, but not much. If you're a humanities or language B teacher, you'll see the same criteria. I will confess that we have moved the humanities, the individuals and societies, we've moved the order around just a bit to bring them in line, but it's the same idea. And we've kept the promise to make very minimal changes in language B and humanities because those just underwent review not long ago. Right? And then the last thing is that if you've been around the MYP Next Chapter talk, we've talked in the past about a collaborative project, and it's going to be instead the community project, but it's still collaborative insofar as groups of 1 or 2 students can work together on it. But it's going to be focused on a service learning model. It is, in my opinion, the single most important and exciting innovation, and you're going to really, really have fun with the community project when that's out there to play with. The last news is that as of 2014, there's no more next chapter, it'll be the chapter, it'll be the last chapter. So it's going to be the only chapter, starting in January 2014, and we'll be going around the world stamping out people who say next chapter anymore, because there was no next chapter, it's just the MYP. Right? Again, I apologize I had to leave early. You can always email us at myp.curriculum@ibo.org, and it's also very easy in the IB to find anybody because you use their first name dot last name. I'm Robert Harrison and would love to hear from you. So thanks very much.
I know you're already applauding, but I just want to say thank you to Robert for being the most amazing colleague to work with. PD rollout is challenging, and he has made it seamless, so thank you, Robert.
Thanks. And to you.
Robert goes a long way in the MYP as a workshop leader, as a consultant here in the Americas, so we're really proud of him. The next part of our presentation is less presentation and more workshop, which is why Sue and I will kick into our roles as facilitative workshop leaders, really. And I hope that you will take some of these activities and ideas as hints for developing your own professional development at your school. So I'd like to refresh your memory that as you walked into the room, we talked about our metaphor being an organic gardening metaphor. To usher in change is like nurturing a garden. And I think it's important at this point to take a look at what that means if we were to tease out that metaphor and think about what it is. It's certainly ensuring lots of sunshine and making sure there are plenty of nutrients and water. And how could you help me to explain that in the context of bringing in change? What would that mean in the context of actually teaching and learning in a school? What comes to mind? Anybody? Looking at ensuring lots of sunshine, nutrients, and H2O, what does that mean in terms of maybe staff development?
Investing in teachers.
Investing in your teachers.
Listening.
Listening to your teachers, especially if you think about the fact that these changes are for first teaching September 2014. It's still a long way off. and there's a lot of anxiety. The buzz is out, and what Robert said about the next chapter being, we're not going to use that term anymore. Teachers have gone to PD for 2 years now, and they've been learning some of these changes a bit at a time. And it's important that you all know the PD plan has been a 3-year drip rather than lights up, May 2014. So it's very important that this development report that you bring to your teachers as they come back to school spells out the changes. You have it. It'll be live on the OCC the 3rd week in August in the 3 languages. So that's an important tool for you to calm people down, maybe do the kind of activities we're doing now. Recognizing that there are a lot of unexpected forces of nature in our organic gardening, right? We're certainly in a city where we know that's true. How would you extend or tease out that metaphor in the school change environment? Anybody else help me with that?
I would say that our districts are often the unexpected forces of nature.
Anybody else have a take on that?
Retirements.
The idea of succession planning. You have lots of innovative teachers in the IB. Linda's job is to keep educating and re-educating our educators. So that continuous professional development. And the last bullet that I came up with was about transplanting seeds of change, and I think that one applies as well. Who are your change agents? How do you identify key stakeholders in your staff to help you usher in these changes so that it is an evolution and not the revolution that we really don't see. We've done on this end with PD or academic, so we don't want that revolution to happen at your school. What it is not is random. Robert's talked a lot about the reasons for the change, that it's better for students, better for teachers, and we really hope you see the clarity in that message. It is not without hard work. We know that organic gardening takes a lot of time and energy. It's certainly not artificial. These changes were not helter-skelter. There's nothing about this that wasn't without lots of teacher feedback, over 200 pilots all around the world to solicit teachers. Lots of changes were made because of the input from our teachers. And it's not without some unexpected results. I want to share with you the most unexpected result that I've enjoyed over the past 2 months. Lots of sleepless nights because you know that PD is where the rubber hits the road with this stuff, right? So I've really worried, and Ted is a great collaborator because he calms me down. Just his voice is calming. He came up to my desk about a month ago and he said, came back from a workshop in McAllen, Texas. And Ted doesn't always get such a big expression on his face. He's pretty cool. But he said, amazing, great news from Texas. People really embrace these changes. So Ted, do you want to elaborate on that for me? Because it was maybe you can recreate that moment because it was such a big one for me.
Well, it basically comes from a PD experience with workshop leaders who were delivering the same global context, key and related concepts, and some of the activities that you just went over. We want to make sure that in workshops they are familiar and comfortable with them themselves first. And then in the workshops themselves, they're sharing them with participants. And the participants really grasp them, you know, in a very big way. And we normally have a debrief on Sunday or Monday morning, the last day of the workshop. And the workshop leaders to the person said, I have no problems. They get it, they embrace it, they understand it. So even in its earliest stages, they understand what the process is like, and they're going to get better with time as they move forward. So I came back and shared that with Stan, and that's exciting because, you know, there didn't seem to be any tension, there was no anxiety, and people get it. So share that with you.
You made my day, my week, my month. That was amazing because when you're trying to introduce aspects in PD and they haven't been published yet, you can't point to even the draft. It's very, I guess, frustrating and a bit scary for me to introduce this shift in the conceptual framework in our professional development and then introduce the global context because our workshop leaders have to do a lot more teaching around it. They don't have the guide to refer to. So please take down in your notes that the subject guides will be live in pre-publication draft in December, and with that, of course, they have the page number to point to. The only thing is, the final publication's not till May, and I suppose some graphics could be cleaned up, but Robert has shared with you the changes. So it's really important that you help us to ground the metaphor. We don't have wild seeds of growth transplanting around the world. These are the seedlings, and you will plant them with us. All right? So your turn. I think the idea of teasing out what a metaphor is and what it is not will be helpful as you work on this in your groups, because what I know about adult learning, being one that suffers a little bit of agitation and boredom at table groups when somebody's talking for hours and hours, I think you've got to somehow operationalize this a little bit. So I'll remind you that I gave you a handout at the beginning that framed the four major aspects of the development report. Of course, the last one is where Sue and I reside. So we'd like you to use that maybe as a reading guide, to spend some time with your groups, and as a group, come up with a metaphor that would represent your take on leading these changes in your school's context. All right? And I do think we'll have time for you also to share some of your table's 3 Ps. Now, does anybody remember what the 3 Ps were? You have your guide there. Yeah, can you read them out?
Promising.
Yeah, lots of them.
Puzzling.
A few of them.
Problematic.
What? Okay. So I'm sure there might be some distribution of the 3 Ps. But I made the terrible mistake at one workshop leader debrief of going along with the field rep's idea to have all the challenges on that side of the wall with yellow stickies, and all of the things that were going well, blue stickies over there. And I happened to be sitting on that side. There was an avalanche of yellow, and I was standing there. There were no blues. So this workshop has been designed strategically. Thank you, Sue, for helping me to come up with something so that we have some balance in the discussion. Now, Ted's here to answer questions about the school service side of things. Which part of the quadrant would that fall under if you look at that reading guide that we've given you? Can anybody see where one of the quadrants points more to Ted's specialty? You see it? Can you read it out?
Professional, right here. Oh, implementing innovation?
Yeah, implementing and innovations, because that really is the school service aspect. And I give you some things to think about there. Sue and I, of course, are the professional development one. Robert's talked mostly about teaching and learning, but this is the time for you to begin thinking about all aspects of delivery. And especially since we hope there's some balance in your table groups between senior leaders, middle leaders, instructional leaders, and community leaders. And I know there aren't as many teachers in the crowd as I thought there might be, but take the role, wear the hat of teacher in your table group. All right, so let's give you a good 20, almost 25 minutes, I think, to do this part, because you have to come up with the metaphor. Now, we have some people who've had to leave, so I suggest that if we blend some tables, if there are just a few people left, you can come forward and join another table. And if you are fine where you are, and you want a small table group, I would like to have time for you to read out what your metaphor is and sort of what it is and what it is not, because I think it's important that you extend your metaphor. So I don't know if we'll have any mad scientists in the room or whatever, but whatever you think the metaphor might be. I've said it's organic gardening. You might come up with something else at your table. All right, any questions? Ted, Sue, and I hope to join you in your discussions over the next 25 minutes. Make sure you have somebody who can take these notes down, because we'll want a table group leader to share out. So make sure you designate somebody who's not shy. It's okay? Did I forget anything? Okay. And I hope you know that you're going to be on camera here, so we're filming. I've had some great conversations. Sue and Ted, thank you for going around and really workshopping this. This is the kind of activity that you might choose to do at your school in order to have buy-in from your instructional leaders, your middle and senior leaders, but you decide what would work for you. I've had some senior leaders in the room tell me the metaphor just wouldn't work, all right? But I think what we're trying to share here is the need for a mix in understanding who should be at the table in order to deliver the change. All right, I have a very brave group over here who's decided to share their metaphor first. And I've had the wonderful fortune of visiting this school in Peru. And you want to introduce your table group and what your metaphor was, David?
Well, no, if it's a good idea, then it was our table's idea. But if it doesn't work, it was Desmond's idea. David.
Remember, we want to, as you said, tease out what it is and what it is not. And if you want to share some of your 3 Ps, that's great too.
Okay, David, Debbie, and Desmond. There you are.
Hello, everyone. So we looked at it working much like a symphony, where you have someone who is leading, and you have several different moving parts that if everything is working together the way it should, you have this beautiful thing. If nothing is working together, then you have this horrid din. And if things are almost perfect, you still, depending on how well you know what it should sound like, you still have different levels of, okay, that's off a little bit. That sounds good, but there's something wrong. And of course, we talked about it for much longer, so there's much more, but I don't want to hog time from your great ideas, so I'll give up the microphone now.
We also felt maybe that metaphor would work for the MYP itself, because you've got your different sections and they're all doing their separate bit, but the beauty of the symphony is only heard when it actually comes together. So that's also a double metaphor for the MYP and the idea of growth. And the only one negative we thought about it was if you think of the MYP coordinator or whoever is the conductor, it can be two. It's not about that person micromanaging being a one-man band, and rather it's about sometimes not necessarily being a militant kind of symphony, but what's the phrase you used? Also having some jam sessions where there's some autonomy in there with some free verse or from some improvisation, to use a New Orleans term.
And David, before you hand the microphone, you also have such great things to say about action and service learning. Could you use this as a moment?
Are you sure? Well, I'm totally ignorant about the new action component in the MYP. Sorry. Face who? What? Where? No, put me on the spot here, Stan. You're a bandit. No, basically, we're trying to adopt the MYP, but we're not quite there yet. And one of the things we've articulated as an action component, 2 things, is that from primary they are looking at more sort of sensitization to things, looking at the environment, and the systemic changes, looking at habits. And then as they go into secondary, action becomes about external systemic change, looking more at social policy changes and so on. So that's one kind of action continuum. The other way the action changes from the PYP transdisciplinary themes, where the action output from the knowledge and so on is centered around the transdisciplinary themes in our IYP, but we do want to go MYP. I don't want to get cursed from here. Is that then the action is actually anchored in subject-specific objectives. So, for example, languages, persuasive language. And you use persuasive language then in an authentic context. So if you're looking at the power of language or slogans, they might make bans for animal rights and then use them, and that's the authentic use. But then the teacher came up to me and said, oh, great, we can sell the bans and we could raise money. But my question is, what's more important for English? Is it the selling and raising money, or was it the use of the real persuasive language? So we're always bringing people back to looking at action per subject. So if it's arts, you'd be looking at the power of the arts to promote culture or minority voices or whatever. But that's anchoring the action in the units. So my question to Stan was, is community in action going to be like CAS, a separate detached thing? And then the final thing we say, just to bring rigor to action, is that you're all familiar with Bloom's taxonomy, right? The 7 stages. And there's the revised Bloom's taxonomy. It's a wonderful chart which has actuation at the end. And basically what you have there is where the action at the end is not personal. It's where you're acting on behalf of a community. And it's not a tag, an add-on action. It's where the action, the culminating action, is the accumulation, the climax of all the other skills. So that the action isn't some tagged-on thing, but it's actually a deeply enriched sort of intellectual, social coming together of everything that they've studied. So using that Bloom's taxonomy, linking it to the units of work, make action the driving force. Looking at that backward plan, when we look at those lines of inquiry, the statement of inquiry, is it going to lead them to take some social action that's based in that subject? So I'm intrigued to know, is this community and action going to be a separate thing, or is there space to put action in the actual units?
Linda, you get his card because we need him as a workshop leader, number 1, but maybe his school will become an MYP school someday. But I did meet David a number of years ago, and he's passionate about service. And if any of you went to Kathy Burgoyne's session, you know this is so critical, is to embed action in your planning to make it authentic. All right, another table with a fantastic visual here.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so what we have here is okay.
There you go.
Yes. So here we have the cat whisperer. This is Mao Tzu. And so here's an illustration of the cat whisperer. Everything is in balance, like in Taoism. So the point here is that we may feel like we're herding cats trying to bring teachers with their different needs and desires, but if you really have that view that you're herding cats, you're just going to get scratched, and you're never going to accomplish what you want to accomplish. But if you are able to see that all of these, what seems like different competing desires, are just part of the natural balance and oneness that is MYP, then you are going to be able to identify the needs of all of these cats. You would not be a cat whisperer if you did not like cats as well. You know, all the things that make educators come to education and those commonalities, you're going to identify those things and where they are in MYP, and so everybody will see, ooh, that this is how this satisfies my needs. So it's all about harmony, balance, natural development. I have the path. You see these many paths of all these different cats, but then they all end up centering in into one, you know, common goal. From many oneness. So what it is not is forcing people to do things.
Amazing. Let's hear it for these first 2 very innovative and brave groups. And notice that they didn't do it in a way where this, what it is not. They both integrated some of the aspects that involve challenges. They teased out the metaphor. Any other tables want to bring in maybe the 3 Ps as well? Okay, so we'll do this and we'll be right back. Okay, I can hold it up for you. All right.
Ann,
do you want to come up, Ann?
All right, I figure we'll use a universal, some universal language. The world has a lot of chemical reactions taking place. So we said lead-in change is like a chemical reaction. From a chemistry perspective, you need stuff. That stuff is your reactants. I mean, making stuff, new stuff. And that new stuff are your products. The visual here, the arrow, implies yield. Yield can be or change agents or catalysts of change. Sometimes the reaction, sometimes you have issues. It does not go because sometimes reactions occur in a solid, liquid, or gaseous state best. Sometimes you need special conditions for them to go. So those could be problematic. Knowing your end product, what you're looking for, you have to reverse engineer to go back and look at your product, your reactants. Those are the people, your champions you're bringing to the table when we're talking about strategies for teaching and learning. What else? On my part, I can pick it up from there.
Well, when he said he was talking about chemistry, I said I'm the last person probably to talk about chemistry. But when you think about the dynamics that people bring to the table when you're doing professional development and leading an organization, you definitely have these things because, one, no one's on the same page usually, because in fact that's one of my problematic ones for me is I have new teachers who need to start with 101, and I have teachers who are veterans who are going to have to know about changing. So I have some will say, what unit planner? Because they're just being hired and starting in August, and I'll have other ones who will be, I have to change my planner. So of course differentiation comes into play, and it's that constant, differentiated professional development, differentiated support for those different people. And we talked about, like in reactants, if you know, like anybody, there are some times when you don't put two people together because the negative energy that happens in that room will do you more damage than it's worth. So you really have to think through how you put those chemicals together, those reactants. And we talked about what it's not. Like you think about back in the days of when your parents got you a chemistry kit and it was really nice at first, and then it goes and sits on the shelf and it just sits there, and then it turns very volatile and everything. So it's like almost dangerous to get professional development and then never do anything with it, and it's not being very safe and everything. So
No explosion.
yeah. So I mean, all the things that come to mind of, it's the same way of when you're working with your chemistry kit. You got to know what to put together, why you're putting it together. You got to have a plan. I'd never want to work with a chemist and didn't have a plan. I told him a story of when I was a beautician. I had a beautician colleague that was going to school, and she put bleach and ammonia together. And it was like we all evacuated the room. And then he told me a better one where some girl poured it down the drain in an apartment, and I said, oh, that exploded the whole system right down the drain, I'm sure. So how dangerous it can be. So you really, as a leader, have to think about your conditions and your agents that you're putting together and how you're going to do it.
One other point too, spontaneous reactions do occur. So, and we can go both ways in there. Look at forest fires, for example. We can take that in a positive way. You put a group of folks together who ordinarily won't really contribute to a change agent type of reform, but the right minds together, and you have this spontaneous conversation of change.
I think you're illustrating your own point with these table group discussions. They were all very positive. Thank you. And it's an appropriate time, I think, Ted, for you to share what we talked about at lunch about if you're freaked out, wait. I like that piece of advice.
Our discussion was around what do I do now that I have a impending program evaluation visit coming? What do I do if I have a verification visit coming? What do I do if I'm a candidate school? With what you've learned today, we certainly want to reiterate again, I think we've done it on 3 occasions, and the updates that we provided over the weekend, is that we don't want you to panic. We don't want anyone to feel that there is a punitive action in the works for you, your school, if for some reason you're caught between the old and the new. So we want to have you be rest assured that that is not the case for you, okay? So for those of you who have program evaluation visits that are coming up in the fall of 2013, are there any of you in the room who have those? Then you should proceed with business as usual, okay, with the self-study and the supporting documents that are required, okay? You should have submitted the self-study and the supporting documents 1 June 2013. And if your teachers have the time and are motivated to do so, you can begin using the new terminology that was presented to you today, okay? That's your choice. What we will need to do is we will need to inform our IB educators who will actually come into the school to do the visits for you that either is acceptable. Okay, is that clear? Okay. So that's for the immediate future for those who are having fall visits 2013. For those of you who have visits in 2014, you should be engaged in your self-study and beginning to pull together documentation for the supporting documents beginning now. At least the self-study should be started. The self-study that is in place now is sufficient. There will be a new self-study. There will be a new application for candidacy and a new application for authorization coming in the spring of 2014 for visits that are in the future, 2014, 2015, fall 2014, spring 2015. So if you're in that situation, you still have time. If you're a school that is interested and you're going to submit an application for candidacy 1 April 2014, then the documentation that is in place and the application that is in place, when we give you permission to complete the application online, will suffice for that candidacy for 1 April 2014. After April 2014, for schools who will be having visits in the fall of 2014, you can begin using the new or the revised application for authorization and the self-study. What you could do is you could begin using the self-study that exists right now, and most of the changes that will be made will be very subtle. They will be a change in terminology, areas of interaction, global context, okay? The use of the unit plan, the existing one, or the new one that's coming out, the draft that's coming out in December 2013 and the final version coming out in 2014. Either will be acceptable, okay? So we want you to rest assured about that, okay? So the one last thing that I wanted to address is the use of the unit planner, because there's some people that are panicking about the unit planner. I think that Robert did a good job saying that, you're not tethered to the fact that you have to use a unit planner. You can design your own using the process. The process is important. So whether you're using the old unit planner or whether or not you choose to adopt the new unit planner, either will be acceptable. So you can rest assured, put your teachers at ease. The biggest problem that you face is whether or not you have the time to make those changes from what you have now to what will be in the future. And over time, when we put out the new milestones and the timeline for the gradual rollout of everything that needs to be done, and the MYP, as it will be called after the first of the year, will tell you exactly, when everyone will be expected to have adopted all changes. And I think it's going to be over a 2, almost 3-year period of time. That is ample time. The way schools and teachers are embracing the changes now should not be a problem. I personally am not worried about it. I think it'll be an easy transition. So, wanted to make that statement to you, and I'll turn it back over to Stan. Okay?
You bet. Did you all hear the question? Global contexts and how they're related to the personal project. We do actually have a new MYP projects guide that will come out in the spring of 2014, as well as an interdisciplinary guide. So those will spell out the precise changes, but it's important to take note that there isn't a huge shift in the personal project. So as students were to identify with an area of interaction to make it the focus of their personal project, you'd see that same thinking aligned with the global context. So it will be a very smooth transition. Absolutely. So that's very linked to what Ted was saying, that there's lots of leeway in this transition. All right? Now we do have a very interesting visual up on the screen and a very creative group that's going to explain it. I was so pleased that many groups had incredibly democratic ways of agreeing upon the metaphor. There were some humanities groups that wanted to stay till 6 o'clock just to talk about the metaphor, but that was not a big problem at any one group. So Thomas is going to explain this.
We started off with a camel and evolved into Emerald's catering company due to the experience that two of our table had. So I'll pass over to them for them to explain what happened to them.
Well, my experience with Emerald was very unique. Never experienced it before as it related to restaurants and the service that they provided. Everyone in my group received their plates at the same time. There was not just one server, there were multiple servers. They all worked together. It was a collaborative effort. And that was the most outstanding experience that I'd ever had. And I couldn't avoid mentioning that and using that as the metaphor to what's needed in order for this change to occur with my staff and with the individuals, the shareholders and the stakeholders. It's a collaborative effort. We have to be flexible. Communication is very important. Your tactics that you use are very important. What else do we write down?
In order to get all the plates to the table at the same time, we'd need to have a very high level of teamwork. They'd have to work collaboratively, and they'd have to be highly organized. In other words, they would need to practice. They wouldn't get it right first time. They would need to practice to make sure that it was all perfectly there. So in other words, it would not be chaotic. It would have to be planned and organized. We envisaged Emerald's Catering Company as a community of practice, having a mission-driven service. The whole experience would not be just the food. It would be the word in Spanish is ambiente. It would be the atmosphere, it would be the smell, it would be everything together, because that's what MYP is about. It's not just one individual experience, it's the whole thing put together.
Great. The 3 Ps, yes. The courses are, when we start with the appetizer, that was akin to the concept that we're moving into. The entree would then be the inquiry statement, and the dessert, of course, is how we reflect and prepare for another dining experience. So that was Emerald's Catering.
Amazing, thank you. And a metaphor that really works, and I just ate there the other night too, and you're right, an amazing service experience as well as great food. And assessment would be the bill at the end. No, just kidding. Oh, the drinks, because it's so fun, yeah. Ready?
Thank you. So we're from Chicago, and so in Chicago, we know that the most important thing is sports. So we have a sports metaphor, but it actually holds quite well. So our teachers are members of the coaching team of the Chicago Bulls when they're led by Phil Jackson. And so the heart of the idea is that we have to be able to adapt. So you have to know the details and the small picture of every play, and each player, the students, has to know what everybody else on the team has to do in order to be successful. But beyond that, there has to be a level of trust where each member understands, or each teammate understands, that at some point the least is going to be the person that makes the winning play. And so you have to know the details of the plays, the small picture, but if you don't understand the philosophy of trust and collaboration and winning as a whole, you can't be successful. And so the reason that we really looked at that metaphor in particular is because we've been a very successful DP school for a long time. And so we're adding MYP for the first time, and some of our families and our staff is a little bit confused about what that's going to mean for us as a whole. So this idea that the external forces in the game change, and that you have to be able to adapt and get the small picture, the technicalities, but also the big picture and the philosophy behind pulling together to win is key. So our winning is that when our students finish, no matter what their skill level was when they came to us, they have this understanding that you need to have technical skill, but you also need to be self-aware. You need to be able to understand that the world is changing, and if you have the skills to adapt, then you can be successful. And it's also being part of a community, being collaborative, trusting, and so that's where we went with ours. Thanks.
All of these metaphors are working for me. Are they? Give him a hand too, as well. His table. And Chicago Public Schools, it can be described as a small country, you know. So this is no small thing that we have our amazing Chicago group here. We have time for a couple more. Is Montreal in the room? Oh, look at that. No, this metaphor here. There's a great conversation about Montreal here. I don't know if that comes into your discussion, but who's sharing out here?
Well, we were trying to find a way to start an MYP program. Instead of, we were not able to work on the MYP, the next chapter, because we weren't, we did not start reading the book, so we were still at the beginning. So we worked on how is it possible to implement a MYP in the school that, like your school, has a DP program that works. And the metaphor is cooking cake and putting the correct ingredients in the cake and following the correct continuum of different stage that we should do, and being aware of the correct cooking temperature at the correct time, because if we cannot read what is written on the stove, the cake would probably burn or won't be cooked. So changing with the next chapter is one thing, or implementing a MYP program is, for us, was the metaphor was trying to cook the best cake that the people would like to eat, and starting with the teachers, and feeling that the teachers would be happy to offer that to their own children. So this is how we worked with that metaphor.
And I'm not sure if you know that we have, what is it, almost 100 MYP in Quebec. Is that about the right number? 115. So we have an amazing respect for the long history of middle years program in Quebec. So thanks for being here, and we've learned so much from the school leaders, from our Francophone workshop leaders, our Francophone site visitors. It's an amazing part of this region. And we've heard a little bit from another amazing part of the region, Latin America. Any other Latin American school leaders here? We have our colleagues, Glory McDowell, other people who represent the region. Yep, Colombia here. Yep. Did your group have a metaphor you'd like to share?
Yeah, briefly, we chose to summit the mountain Nevado del Ruiz in Colombia, from my friend here. So we had several analogies that we thought made sense. First, if you're going to take on a significant climbing expedition like that, it's planning, having clear roles and responsibilities. Who's going to take the lead? Who are the climbers? Who are the Sherpas? We thought that probably was the IB coordinators, and then also thinking about concepts such as looking at your thought partners, other people who have climbed similar mountains. So we thought maybe there's a link to our friends who are in the primary years program who have implemented many of the elements of this middle years framework. We also thought there was a nice connection between the notion of base camp, so to make sure the whole team gets to a level and then they can acclimate to that difference in oxygen levels, and everyone's there, and you're there for a few days, the whole team, the whole school, school-wide, and then you're sending off a few people to trail the next spot up the mountain, and then you're bringing everybody up alongside you. There's parts of assessment that just has to do of continuously monitoring weather conditions, patterns, making adjustments, and being able to change your plans as you go to make sure you can kind of safely get there. So that worked for us.
Thank you. Great metaphor. So from Argentina to Quebec and back again, we have a very, very expansive region in the Americas. And we've heard from some of the stakeholders from different parts of our region. Is there one last metaphor to share out, one table group that just has to do this or they won't get on the plane satisfied? Otherwise, you ready, this group? Yeah. Margaret's group was really productive. She's lost some of them, but
yes, they've already headed home. We had a group here from as far from California and to New York, the Dwight School, with places in between, Texas and Wisconsin and, New York as well. And in contrast to our first group, we saw change as herding cats. We thought if you were going to herd cats, you would need a pathway that you established to use for them. And as you moved along that pathway, then of course you would have a destination, which would be excellent implementation of the MYP for the benefit of our students. As you're moving along that pathway with a herd of cats, you would need to be creative. You would need to adjust quickly. You would need to have coverage. You would need to be flexible. You would need to have an amazing support system. And you would need to have that leader who could block out the other noise. The things that would not be happening along that path is, even though you're herding cats, it's not necessarily chaotic. You would have respect for the individual. They would be moving not at the same speed, but in the same direction. It would not be about the individual. It would be about the students and the destination. It would not be easy. It would not be quick. It would not be linear, but it is a pathway worth taking.
So we have just a few moments left before we finish up. The amazing energy in the room gives me renewed strength to implement these changes. The ideas you have to usher in changes as change leaders, that's really come out in these last few hours, that middle and senior leaders have a very important role to stabilize the environments in which you deliver the program. And I really appreciate how you're going to be joining Ted, Sue, Robert, myself, Gloria, Linda, other members of staff in the room. Sophia has probably had to leave, but we really appreciate the high level of professionalism that you've expressed and the kinds of concerns that you've expressed along the way. Many of you have emailed and called the regional office to ask about these very things you've explored today. I would like to close by saying it's not rocket science to plan your PD within your school, which was part of my presentation, that you don't need to spend your entire budget or go to your superintendent to say we have to retrain all of our leaders. I love that we brought out the PYP expertise being used. You can certainly begin to usher in change using some of the thought leaders and curriculum developers that you have within your systems, because this is a continuum alignment. You see DP alignment issues coming into play with the simplified criteria, the subject groups being more similar in title. There is lots to do along a continuum thread, so use the leaders that you have within your systems and the networks that you've made around the tables today. So on behalf of IB Americas and Global Professional Development, School Service colleagues, IB Educator Network colleagues, I thank you for spending your afternoon with us, and I thank my colleagues for sharing in the delivery.